technical support for the national just sharing global best practice, providing some forum for inclusive dialogue, ensuring the voices of women, people with disability, and ethnic minorities are part of some of those processes. And as you all know, I think quite well, Professor Yunus also requested OHEHR to launch an independent fact-finding mission following the July-August unrest. And that has been released. The High Commissioner's October visit also enabled a deep engagement with reform commissions, civil society, and students. And that report, released in February, offered vital recommendations to strengthen accountability and build institutional trust. And we're obviously ready to support the interim government and the next politically elected government with implementation of some of those recommendations. We've also been supporting families of enforced disappearances. Following the unrest, we facilitated public sessions for the families to share information and to document cases. And we are also continuing to support the interim government in establishing a new commission of inquiry and signing the Convention on Enforced Disappearances. Since August, I think we've proven ourselves to be a trusted and reliable partner, even as we address immediate shocks. Our commitment to the long-term inclusive development of the country remains steadfast. I think you all have in front of you our 2024 country results report. This marks the 50th anniversary of our work here in this country, which we also celebrated this year. And in 2024, we delivered $215 million in development programming, and it's outlined in the report. But just to give you some of the headlines, $72 million was provided to support universal healthcare coverage and maternal and primary healthcare. Close to $40 million went to climate action and resilience. 30 million supported economic development, governance, and gender equality programs. We have 22 active joint programs. That's really where the UN works with different programs and with different partners. And there's more programs in Bangladesh than any other Asia-Pacific country. Bangladesh is a regional leader in UN coherence and integrated support. So a lot to be proud of. We champion an integrated approach to sustainable development, focusing on climate resilience, economic transformation, and demographic change. We're looking at green transition, clean energy investments, sustainable urban development, unlocking climate finance through the integrated national financing framework. So a lot of the details are in the report that we shared with you if you're interested in going through. Human development is, of course, central to our mission. We support government leadership in health, education, and social protection while prioritizing gender equality as both a right and a driver of progress. We also support national migration policies, strengthening data systems and services for internal and cross-border migrants. And this is another area of work I think that's been really focused on and reinforced by the interim government. Aligned with Bangladesh's economic transformation goals, the UN has supported labor market reforms as well. Our Advancing Decent Work initiative equips young people with future-ready skills and promotes workforce inclusion for persons with disability and marginalized groups. We've also launched an employment injury scheme for garment workers, now covering community-related injuries, providing safety nets for thousands of families. Reintegration support for returning migrants has expanded through migrant welfare services, offering holistic services, and there's a lot of focus as well on women returning. These efforts are all interconnected. Economic transformation must be inclusive and climate smart. Gender equality must underpin all policies, and human development must be rooted in rights, equality, and dignity. You all know that Bangladesh is one of the most climate-effective countries. We've also mobilized $45 million for disaster response last year, reaching 1.7 million people with healthcare, water, sanitation, livelihoods, and shelter. In May, we approved $10 million for anticipatory action to support communities before floods and cyclones. So that means if there's floods in the river basins this year, we'll be able to provide assistance to families so that they can, before the flood arrives, so that they can protect themselves, they can protect their livelihoods, their animals, and their belongings. So this is something that we've is the biggest anticipatory action framework in the world, and I think Bangladesh is again a leader on that front. You mentioned Rohingya response. It remains a huge challenge, a critical challenge, and Professor Yunus and I spoke about it yesterday. Over 1 million refugees continue to live in Cox's Bazar. Under the government leadership, the UN and our partners continue to provide life-saving support. Last year, we mobilized $549 million under the Joint Response Plan for refugees and host communities. However, this year we're expecting funding to drop significantly. It already has. This is not a Bangladesh issue, this is a global issue that we're facing across the world. We are working with government, the NGOs, to provide life-saving assistance, including food, healthcare, shelter, and protection. But we have to prioritize some of that support given the drops in financing that we're facing. But the big worry is also the fact that the humanitarian situation in Rakhine continues to worsen, if not getting any better. So just to commend, and it's really important to re-emphasize this, Bangladesh's generosity as a host community, something that we continue to reiterate and reaffirm. Our support to Bangladesh, our commitment to a rights-based, solutions-oriented humanitarian support. We aim to better equip the Rohingya for early, voluntary, and sustainable and safe return to Myanmar when conditions allow. But right now, the conditions are very challenging. Looking ahead, the UN and Bangladesh remains committed to being a principled, effective, and responsive partner. Our 2025 priorities include overall, and I'm going back to the broader development priorities in Bangladesh, supporting smooth transition strategy for LDC graduation, strengthening national institutions through reform commissions, scaling climate financing and inclusive green development, supporting preparations for free, fair, and credible elections, accelerating gender equality and social justice, mobilizing innovative finance for the SDGs through public-private partnerships. You also mentioned that last week we marked UN Peacekeepers Day in Dhaka. Bangladesh is the third largest contributor to UN peacekeeping, with over 200,000 personnel deployed since 1988. Today, 5,818 Bangladeshi peacekeepers serve in 10 missions worldwide. We really and deeply appreciate Bangladesh's commitment to peacekeeping and human rights. Echoing the Secretary General, I also would like to say that we honor the dedication and the sacrifices as well of Bangladeshi peacekeepers serving in some of the world's most challenging environments, from Somalia to the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia to Sudan. For the UN overall, it's also been a challenging year. In 2024, it marked the launch of the UN 80 initiative, a bold vision to revitalize the UN and make it more fit for purpose. It reaffirms the importance of multilateralism and collective action, and Bangladesh is a stalwart upholder of multilateralism. This initiative aims to strengthen the UN's three pillars: peace and security, human rights, and development, but really has a lot of focus around efficiency and effectiveness. In Bangladesh, we're also contributing to this vision. We've now moved into one UN house in Gulshan, one UN premises, saving about $1.5 million and providing coherence and greater collaboration to better support Bangladesh. And we're proud to be one of the earlier adopters of this model in the region. As I mentioned already, this week I met with the Chief Advisor, Professor Yunus, and reaffirmed the UN's commitment to human and economic development, governance, human rights, and gender equality. I reiterated our support for the Rohingya response, especially ahead of the high-level conference in September. In the face of the complexity and this moment in Bangladesh, the UN stands for human dignity and rights. We pledge to support the shared promise of peace, prosperity, and sustainability for everybody living in the country. Thank you all. Don the bad. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Maybe two or three together is better.
Okay, we can take three questions together. First, Mr. Imran, our former president.
As you have said, the UN is involved in
whether the humanitarian political is still available, and if so, is there any development that will be there? Mr. Bashir Ahmed, our former General Secretary, and he's from DCAB. You mentioned that UN Contribution on the United side is still on track. At that time, the High Commissioner of Human Rights Commission also stated that UN had asked for additional information on that. Do you have any plan to get information with the government as that has was underway? This is part of that activity, and who are the involved in the Bangladesh. Particular parties are demanding the article. Some are demanding that the process will be completely peaceful. So, what is your position? What is the UN position? Mr. Imrul Kaya from Bangladesh. Okay. Go ahead. That is, you have mentioned in your request that you are close to what you will see. I think the limit about the media so, my question is, how long your specific subject, I mean, lecture subject, how long? Next round.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So on the humanitarian corridor question, I think I've issued several comments and statements on this already. But a humanitarian corridor is quite a formal legal issue, and it requires agreement between sovereign states. So it requires the government of Bangladesh and the Myanmar counterparts, and potentially any other groups that are involved, to agree formally. If there's an agreement, the UN can support, but that agreement, as I understand it, has not been established as yet. So I think any initiative to improve cross-border relations, any initiative to support people that are impacted by the conflict in Myanmar is very welcome and very supported by the UN, but there is no humanitarian corridor in place as such, and we haven't been involved in discussions to establish such a corridor. So to clarify that it really is between governments, it's something that we can support once it's established, but there is quite a legal process behind something like a corridor. On the, there was a question on the elections and our position on political parties and the reform agenda and what should come first. So we are obviously supporting the election commission on the technical side, but it's, and I use that word very specifically because it's technical support based on a formal request from the government. The United Nations is here to support participatory, credible elections, but we do not have a role in deciding when elections will be held, and we don't have a political opinion on what should come first. So that really is for the people, the government, the political parties of Bangladesh to decide. So happy to support on reform efforts if requested. We're also happy to support on supporting the election commission, but there's no position in terms of any of the political dynamics in the country. And for OHCHR's report, the recommendations are quite clear. A lot of the recommendations that came out of the report are being looked at, I understand, by the interim government. And if and when some of those recommendations are implemented, we again are ready to support technically. Additional information that is queried from the government through any of the legal processes will go to OHCHR. And that's something that I believe is with the justice system and OHCHR, and I can't comment further on that. But I know that if information is available, I'm sure there can be some agreement reached. But beyond that, I don't have any comment on that. And how long will we be here to support the government? I think the UN and Bangladesh has always been here to support the people of Bangladesh. We've been here for 50 years. We will continue to stay to support the flooding, the climate crisis, the development of this country and to support Bangladesh in hosting 1 million refugees. So I think, I don't know, and beyond that, I think we're committed to stay here for as long as we're needed.
Okay, Mr. Mahfouz from Humanitarian.
Yeah, my question is about there a full commitment that if any army or any defense force of any country like Bangladesh comes to the power or gets a government, then they will not be allowed even or idea.
Mr. Sajid from Turkey from Australia. One more second, right? Wait.
On the peacekeeping question, I'm not sure I fully understood. But first of all, just to say that Bangladesh's contribution to peacekeeping is incredibly valued by peacekeeping operations, and I think that's been said by the Secretary General, but also the Under Secretary General was here recently, because the forces and the peacekeepers are incredibly good at what they do, and they've proven themselves over the many years in terms of their contribution, but also their humanity and their ability to work with local communities to address very complex situations. So I think just to emphasize Bangladesh's support is really important. But obviously, like with every troop contributing country, we encourage countries to put in place a human rights screening mechanism to make sure the peacekeepers and whoever are deployed meet the standards that's expected of UN staff. So that's something that we've encouraged the government in Bangladesh and the peacekeeping units that are deployed to really make sure that that screening is robust, because it is important not only to make sure the work that we be doing is done in the right way, but also to maintain the very good reputation that Bangladesh has. I don't know if that answers your question. And in terms of the ongoing support, we believe and hope that will continue. In terms of the situation inside Myanmar, obviously Rakhine is very difficult to assess. It's very volatile, and the conflict is ongoing. There was a memorandum of understanding between the government, de facto authorities in Myanmar and UNDP and UNHCR in terms of providing support, and so that